I want you to take a look at the following diagram, which is going to show up on the screen for just a couple seconds here. Just check this out. All right. Did that go away? Okay, how many would agree with me that the diagram said a bird in the bush? Yes. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the diagram again. All right, it should go away. How many of you would agree with me that it still says a bird in the bush? Raise your hands. Come on, be bold. All right, good. Let's look at it again. All right, how many would still agree that the diagram says a bird in the bush? All right. One last time. Read it carefully. A bird in the bush. Did you see that? Let's go back again. A bird in the bush. It actually said a bird in the bush. So if this is the point, it's easy for us to miss what the diagram actually says because our brains tend to automatically fill in the blanks for what we're wanting to read, for what we're wanting to hear. And I'd like to suggest to you that this exact same dynamic takes place, this dynamic that prevented most of us from catching all of the words that were actually on the screen. The same dynamic takes place in our relationships as well. That is, the messages that we think we hear from others are often not the messages that they're sending to us. And as a result of that dynamic, we often find ourselves in conversations that sound something like this. But I said, no, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. I said, da-da-da. That's not what I heard. Does anybody else in the world ever have conversations like that? Okay, a couple of us here. It happens all the time because we often hear the words that a person is saying to us, but we can do that without actually listening to what they're actually saying. And so this morning, as we continue in our Loving on Purpose message series, what we're going to look at this morning are some just practical biblical wisdom for how we can better love others on purpose by better listening to what they're actually saying. We spent the last several weeks looking at how we can love others on purpose by better communicating the truth that's on the inside of us. And this morning we're going to look how we can better love others on purpose by better listening to and better drawing out the truth that's inside of them. And this is the key idea you need to have in mind as we dive into this topic this morning. The goal of communication in loving relationships is understanding. That's the key word, understanding. So let's read this key idea together. In loving relationships, the goal of communication is understanding. Again, the word understanding is key here, and though this may seem like an obvious truth, in a moment we're going to see that understanding is not often the goal of our actual communication. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's first do this. Let's lay a biblical foundation for the importance of understanding as the goal of our communication. In verses like Proverbs 1:5, the Bible spells out the importance of understanding. We understand to act. Oh, by the way, do you have sermon notes in your bulletin this morning? Yeah, do you have them? Okay. I haven't done sermon notes in a long time, so this is a special treat. I'm doing this because I'm going to be throwing so much stuff at you so fast, you're going to need something to reference. So if you pull that out, it might help you keep up. But do buckle your seatbelts. This is going to be dangerously fast. All right, so Proverbs 1:5 spells out the importance of understanding, and that is we understand to act. We understand to act. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, but a man of understanding will attain wise guidance. And so this verse contrasts the differing results of merely hearing versus understanding. It tells us that when we wisely hear, we increase in learning. That is, we gain more knowledge. we gain more information, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But this verse tells us that when we understand, when we do something more than just hear, but when we understand, we acquire something even better. We attain wise guidance. That is, by understanding, we acquire more than just information about what to think, but by understanding, we gain wisdom for what to do. Listening to merely hear results in information, but listening to others for the purpose of understanding them opens the door to act. We listen, we understand, we act. Listen, understand, act. And that's a phrase that's actually coined, I believe, as a customer service motto in the corporate world. Listen, understand, act. But it's actually good Bible. It's actually very good Bible. And in the context of relationships, when we actually listen to others for the goal of understanding, we gain, we're told here in Proverbs 1, we gain wise guidance for how to act, how to respond lovingly in loving others on purpose. And so when we actually do understand what another person is saying to us, there is what I call an act question. A question of action that will or should or can often follow understanding them. And that act question is a question that sounds something like this. Oh, what do you need from me? So I want you to elbow the person next to you. If you don't have a person next to you, Chris, you can just go find somebody and elbow them at random, just for fun. So just elbow them next to you and just practice this act question. What do you need from me? Okay, go. You got 10 seconds. All right, now the other person gets to do it. Okay, now listen to this. That is a very powerful question. What do you need from me? And it's a very loving question when that question flows out of a place of having understood what's going on with the other person. When you try to use the act question, what's going on with you, but you really have not first tried to understand or sought to understand what's going on with the other person, the question, at best falls flat on its face, but at worst, it completely backfires. Because listen to this, there's a huge difference when we're trying to love another person on purpose. There's a huge difference between responding without understanding where they're coming from. It's like, okay, I don't get it. What do you need from me? Right? There's the act question, without understanding. And that's totally different from responding with understanding. Oh, I get it. What do you need from me? Can you tell the difference? Understanding is key. So though the words of the act question can be easily articulated, the power of the question only flows out of a place of understanding. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, but a man of understanding will attain wise guidance. Oh, I get it. What do you need from me? So Proverbs 1:5 is specifically talking about the importance of understanding what God is communicating to us. But there's another proverb, Proverbs 25, that applies the importance of understanding to our relationships with others. And it tells us why understanding is so important. A second reason why understanding is so important in our relationships with others. This passage reads, "A plan in the heart of a man is like deep water, but a man of understanding," there's that word again, "a man of understanding draws it out." And so this verse tells us that the plan in the heart of another individual, that is what's going on inside them, the truth inside of them is like deep water. What does that mean? Well, if you've ever tried to look into the depths of a deep body of water, you know that you can't really see much beyond what's happening on the surface, right? Especially around here with our mucky lakes. You can't see too far beneath the surface. And so the Bible is telling us here that another person's heart, the heart of a person on the other side of our loving relationship, their heart goes way deeper than our superficial observations. if, from the surface, we attempt to catch a glimpse of what's going on deep down inside another person, at best we're just going to see murkiness. Right? And this verse then goes on to tell us that clarity can be drawn out of the depths of another person's heart through this tool, through this gift of understanding. A plan in the heart of a man, it's like deep water, but a man of understanding draws it out. It draws it out. So understanding enables us to act. Understanding enables us to draw out of a person's heart what's going on there. We understand to draw out. And so the truth about what's going on inside of another person is lovingly discovered not by telling them what's going on inside their heart, not by telling them what I presumptuously believe is going on in their heart, right? We talked about that last week, and we concluded that's arrogance, right? That's not loving, that's judgmental arrogance. The truth about what's going on inside another person is not discovered merely by superficially hearing the words they're saying, but rather the truth about what is going on in your mom's heart, your dad's heart, your sister's heart, your wife's heart, your children's heart, your coworkers, that person who just came into the store where you're a customer service rep and they're mad, right? The truth about what's going on inside them is drawn out through understanding. All right, does that make sense? All right, so this is pretty obvious stuff. You're saying to yourself, can't quit belaboring this point. Of course, I listen to others for the purpose of understanding them. The fact of the matter is, I personally believe we don't. We don't listen to others for the purpose of understanding them. I would like to suggest that we most often listen to others for the purpose of being understood, not for the purpose of understanding. We most often listen to others for the purpose of composing what we're going to say in response to them, not to understand what they're saying to us. And especially when relationships are in breakdown, we are most often listening to what the other person is saying, not to understand what's going on the inside of them, so that we can sincerely ask the question, what do you need from me? But rather, we listen to compose our counterpoint rebuttals for why they are wrong. We often listen not to understand the other person's point of view, but to figure out how we can make them understand our own point of view. All right, sorry, my wire is doing something funny back here. So we listen not to hear. We listen most often, I'd like to suggest, to be heard. Does that sound like anybody you know? Yeah. That is honestly why and how most of us most often listen. And this is an unloving goal of communication. The unloving goal of communication that we most often pursue, especially when relationships are breaking down, is not understanding, but it's what I call lawyering. Next slide. This is the goal of communication, and it's the unloving goal. I'd say that we often operate in, not to understand, but to lawyer. Not understanding, but lawyering. We listen only insofar, we listen to the other person only insofar as we can build a case so that we can win our case. All right, so if what I think is true here, if lawyering is what most of us most often do, I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Listen to what this practically means. It means that for all of us, in conversations, especially when we're in conflict, we are most often then listening to ourselves, talk to ourselves about what the other person is saying, rather than listening to what the other person is actually saying. Did you understand that? In conversations, we are probably most often listening to ourselves, talk to ourselves about what the other person is saying rather than listening to what the other person is actually saying. So put another way, in conversations and especially in conflict, I am most often talking to Kent and listening to Kent about what Kent is thinking about what Leanna is saying. She's not in the room, she's off running the screen, and so she can't amen loudly, all right? I am most often listening to Kent talk to Kent about what Kent thinks Leanna is saying rather than actually listening to what Leanna is saying. And you do the exact same thing, especially when relationships break down. In conversations with another person, you are actually most often having an ongoing conversation with yourself, and the other person just happens to get to be an incidental part of your little private conversation. They get to be a little part of it. Does that sound like anybody you know? Yeah, it does. And speaking from pastoral experience, I just got to say, I see this all the time. You have two people, especially if conflict is happening. Person A is having a conversation with person A. Person B is having the conversation with person B, and neither one of them is having the same conversation. And that's why conflict is often not resolved. Person A and B aren't actually conversing with one another about the same topic. And that's why you may find yourself in conflicted conversations, saying sentences like this: what are you even talking about? Are we even talking about the same thing? No, right? We aren't having the same conversations because we're not listening to what the other person is actually saying for the purpose of understanding them. We're listening to lawyer them. We're listening to ourselves, talk to ourselves about what the other person is saying so we can be right, so that we can win. Sound like anybody you know? Okay. All right, and so then that leads to some practical wisdom about how to actually have a loving conversation with another human being, beside yourself, that is, right, that involves this gift of listening for the purpose of understanding. And so first I want to highlight just two postures for better listening. The first posture for better listening is an engaged external posture, and this is no-nonsense, practical stuff we all know. Engaged external posture is simply undistracted attentiveness. When you're listening to another person, put down your phone, turn off the TV, look at them face to face, make eye contact, give them some verbal and nonverbal clues that you're actually attending to what they're saying, right? You know that sort of stuff. These are simply no-nonsense, good listening courtesies that we probably know we should choose, but we sometimes don't. Right? Because we're naturally way better at loving ourselves and listening to ourselves, talk to ourselves, than we are actually engaging another person to truly understand what it is that they're saying. James 1:19, it's not on the screen. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. So to better understand another person, we need to listen with this engaged external posture, just like you all are for me right now. Thank you. I feel loved. I am loved. Thank you. But with that, we need to listen, and listen to this, with a disengaged internal posture, an engaged external posture, an engaged or disengaged internal posture. This means that when we're listening to others, we need to, intentionally choose to suspend all that internal mind talk. We need to hit the pause button in all the conversations we're having with me, myself, and I about what the other person is saying so that we can actually listen to what the other person is saying. All right? We need to suspend this self-loving, the self-defensiveness that's queuing up as they're saying, their unguarded, their unfiltered thoughts. And it's just like this bricks, the walls that are going up inside, right? We just need to suspend the bricklaying, the internal rebuttal composition, all right? I have to remember that what they said there was wrong, and oh man, there's so many things that are wrong about what they're saying. I hope I can remember my case when they finally shut up, right? We just need to suspend this little private dialogue we're carrying on deep inside so that we can actually listen to. We can create emotional space for them. We can create verbal space through our silence, verbal space for the other person to unpack their thoughts, to unpack their feelings, to unpack their desires and their needs. We talked about the importance of honest thoughts and feelings and desires and expressing those in loving relationships. When they're on the listening end, we have to create space for the other person to honestly communicate those things to us. And that can be very difficult for most of us to do because often we will hear the other person share some unguarded thoughts, share some unguarded feelings, share some unguarded desires that push our buttons, right? When that happens, you're listening. We know when our buttons got pushed because our internal energy goes from here to, some people you can actually see it registering on their body. They're going to blow, right? You know what I'm talking about. And so when we're listening posture, when we're in a listening posture, we need to clue into that escalating energy that is registering internally like a warning light on a dashboard that's telling us that, we're in danger of blowing the engine of a loving relational connection. And we need to seek God's help to choose to just intentionally dial down that internal energy. All right, you remember all the way back in week 2, we said that in loving relationships, the Holy Spirit empowers us to control ourselves so that we can love. The Holy Spirit empowers us to control ourselves. And so when we're creating space for another person to be honest about the truth that's going on inside of them, they're going to push our buttons, they're going to hurt our feelings, they're going to say things that are so wrong. I need to invite the Holy Spirit just to dial down that internal energy. I need to shut up all the conversations that Kent is having with Kent about what Kent thinks so that I can listen to understand so I can act wisely. So we need to maintain, by the Holy Spirit's empowering, this disengaged internal posture. All right, now, listen, this is not pop psychology. This is straight out of the Bible. Listen to the words of Proverbs 17:27. He who restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of what? Understanding. This verse says that when we restrain our words, when we just shut up and listen, we gain knowledge, and knowledge is a good thing. But moreover, when on the inside we maintain a cool spirit, when we dial down that internal energy, when we can actually listen from this posture of, disengaged, internal posture, we can actually become people who do what? Understand. And so 2 postures for better listening: an engaged external posture and a disengaged internal posture. All right, lastly, I just want to touch on the process of better listening. I apologize. This really begged to be a sermon in and of itself, but I'm out of weeks for myself on this series. So we're going to fly. This is going to be good stuff, but you're going to probably want a little bit more explanation on some of this. All right, I want to quickly put some practical communication tools in your hand that will help you better understand another person by drawing out what is going on in the murky depths of their hearts. And I want you to think of this listening process. It's a 3-step listening process that I'm going to unpack for you. Think of it like with this analogy. The person that you are listening to is like a DVD player. They're like a DVD player, and they're reading information, on kind of like the disc of their heart. And they're reading information, and they're sending you information about what he or she is thinking, about what he or she is feeling and needing. They're like the DVD player. Your job as a listener is like being the TV screen. All right? The TV screen's job is just to capture as accurately as possible the signals that are being sent from the DVD player, right? Your job as a listener is not to reinterpret. It's not to revise that signal. Your job is simply to reflect the signal. Does that make sense? Just simply to reflect. And this reflection process has 3 steps. First, you just simply mirror their signal. You just simply mirror what the DVD player is sending to you with this simple sentence stem. Okay, I'm hearing you say that, ... I'm hearing you say that. Did I get it? All right? Make sense? Simple question. I would counsel you, memorize this line. I am hearing you say that, ... Did I get it? And then you give the other person space to clarify what you got, to clarify what you did not get, and then you get to repeat the process. Okay, all right, now. All right, I'm hearing you say that, ... Now did I get it? And it might take a couple iterations. The signal verification process can take some time. And eventually, the DVD player will say to you, that's it. What's showing up on the screen is what's coming from my heart. All right? You get it? And that can take time because often, when we're in the DVD player mode, and I talked about this several weeks ago, we often have a tough time knowing what's going on that disc ourselves. Sometimes we have to process ourselves, and when we hear somebody reflect what we just said, it's like, oh, no, I guess that's not what I meant. Let's reread the disc. Oh, I think I meant this. All right, so let me see if I got that. I think I'm hearing you say this. Did I get it? Yes. You've taken a very important step in mirroring towards understanding the person. So that's the first step in the process. The second step in the process is validation. Validation. You validate the other person's thoughts with this simple sentence stem. Oh, what you're saying makes sense because, and you explain why it makes sense. And then again, you always check in. Am I playing what you're sending? All right. What you're saying makes sense because, so the purpose of the validation step is to acknowledge the validity of the other person's thoughts. It's to acknowledge the validity of what they're thinking. Most often, I'd like to suggest to you that when relationships break down, when you're in lawyering mode as a listener, you are more likely to say something that sounds like this. Well, that's stupid. You shouldn't think that. You're wrong. All right? What kind of impact does it have on you when you're just sharing your naked thoughts? You're just, oh, here is who I am and this is what I thought. And somebody says to you, well, that's dumb. What do? You shut back down, right? But if the other person says to you, oh, I see what you're saying. That invites the person into greater intimacy, doesn't it? That's how we build loving communication, is through understanding, and we communicate understanding through mirroring and validation, not through lawyering. I see. It makes sense to me what you're saying. Now, let me tell you, this is a hard step to do. Validation can be hard to do, especially when we disagree with the other person, when we do think that their thoughts are wrong. You're thinking that? You've got to be kidding. That is so stupid, right? It's hard to validate what you believe to be a stupid thought. So, for instance, this is how we can still validate a thought that we might not necessarily agree with. So I might find myself saying to somebody that I'm in broken down, relationship with, it's like, I can totally understand how the joke that I told, when you were there and I told that joke, I can totally understand why you think that was a personal attack. It totally makes sense, It was a joke about a person with a certain hair color that wasn't thinking clearly. That was the joke, and you so happen to have that hair color, right? I don't tell jokes like that, by the way, but, maybe I do. But you see, the person can be offended because they thought that was a dig at me. And it can actually be true that I really did not mean for it to be a dig at them. But it totally makes sense that they thought it was a personal attack. You understand that? I can validate it even though I don't agree with it. And, I can make a validating reflection even when I didn't tell the joke as a personal attack. But instead of choosing to lawyer against their thoughts, but I didn't tell the joke for that reason. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Where's that going to go? Nowhere. The tool of validation just frees me up to say instead, I can totally see why you think that I told the joke as a personal attack. I'm sorry. All right, which is going to work better in building a loving, intimate connection with another person? Validation. Validation. So, I think you can easily see how accurately mirroring what the other person is saying, and you combine that with validating, the validity of the other person's thoughts, it'll go way farther towards building a relational connection than lawyering. All right, finally, the third step in the listening process is empathizing. Empathizing. You empathize with the other person's feelings with this simple sentence stem. I can imagine that you might be feeling, insert emotion. We talked about emotion a couple weeks ago. All two of them. No, never mind. You empathize with the other person's feelings just by simply reflecting this. I can imagine that you might be feeling, fill in the blank. Did I get it? All right? So in a similar way that the validation step is seeking to validate the other person's thoughts, the empathizing step seeks to validate the other person's feelings. It makes sense to me that you thought that joke was a personal attack. I can imagine that you feel really hurt, right? Yeah, I do feel really hurt. I'm sorry for healing you. I'm sorry for hurting you. Will you forgive me? All right? Empathizing is way more effective towards building relational connection than lawyering. Because what do we actually say in lawyering mode? You shouldn't feel that way. It's dumb. You shouldn't feel hurt because I didn't do what you think in your stupid brain. I thought you thought I did or whatever. Right? We can destroy their thoughts and we can destroy their feelings through lawyering, or we can validate and empathize by saying, well, I get why you're thinking that, and I can see that must hurt. You see the difference? There's a huge, huge difference. And so listening, this listening process of mirroring and validating and empathizing, this is a powerful listening tool, and it works. And this is not just the stuff of marriage or dating relationships or whatever, all right? This works at work. This works at Walmart. This works. This just simply works because it works. All right, so to wrap this all up, our key idea this morning is this. In loving relationships, the goal of communication is understanding. Let's read that together. In loving relationships, the goal of communication is understanding, and understanding comes through two listening postures: an engaged external posture, a disengaged internal posture. And understanding comes through this listening process of mirroring what the other person is saying to us, validating the thoughts that are being communicating to us, and empathizing with the emotions that are being communicated to us. And then, when we understand what the other person is saying, we can act. We can ask the act questions like, oh, this is what you're saying. Yes, it makes sense to me what you're thinking. You must feel this. Yes, I get it. What do you need from me? You see how much more powerful the act question is when it comes from a place of understanding. When we choose to act from the act question, we can love others on purpose.